welcome to our ad hoc Heartwork and Philosophy Guild meeting on this 26th of September. As we begin all of our meetings, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. And would anyone like to do the land acknowledgement as soon as they're finished chewing?
I would
Or
love
anyone
to.
can do the land acknowledgement. April
I
has done
and
land
I do
acknowledgements
want to. I
before that have
always
been
want to
brilliant.
make space for other people, but I
Yeah.
do love doing it, so I never mind to do it. And would anyone like to preempt?
No.
All right, cool. Ah, bring up my norm, and we begin by acknowledging the land because the land was here before we were, more than 2,025 years ago, and the land will continue to be here long after we are gone. And everything that we need to survive and to thrive comes from the land and returns to the land. And so we borrow from indigenous wisdom by reminding ourselves at the beginning of any time we gather together about how we are connected through the land and dependent on the land and part of the land. And so we do this as I think it's the um, Kadasadani say, so we can bring our minds as one to why we are here, big picture. And we are here, big picture, to care for the land and to care for the people who care for the land, and to understand that when we care, that the everything that we receive is a completely generous gift that we have never earned or deserved. And but in gratitude, we can care for the things that care for us. And so that's why we're here today in this meeting and here on the planet. And in doing that, we recognize an obligation of care, which also means an obligation to go into those hurt places, into the places where wounds have happened and haven't healed yet. And so this reminder of our connection to the land is also an encouragement for us to uh, show up and grow up, to stand up and be present and to care for the things that we love, knowing that when we care for the things we love, they care back for us. So we're all in this together, and yeah, how can we support each other in doing what we can, where we can, when we can, to leave things a little nicer than we found them, to heal any harms we may have found along the way, and also to do our utmost to prevent causing any unnecessary harms as we move forward. Back to you, Phil.
Thanks, Bob. Bob, could I ask you to be our note taker? That'd be all right. Thank you. Um, Okie dokie. Um, so April, I think we were having this meeting to go over what outreach proposed as being um, some of the co-working with them around the property and the pharmacery and the fundraising. Is there anything else that you can think of that we?
No, it's really that, and it's really, I guess, the how to, and what are we talking about in terms of if we are going to do some relational work around the connections that are being made by outreach, then what does that look like? Is there a
Mhm.
time frame for it? Is there content or a script for what we do? Um, and how do we figure out what is appropriate from our guild and its usual activities?
Cool. I was thinking it might be useful just to look at the notes in Asana from the coordination meeting, and I have them up, but I'm not sure how to. Oh, oh, Ben is sharing it. Never mind. Bob has it on in hand. I think the main two that have Heartwork in is the compiling warm allies and there was another one. Hang on, let me check my notes. Oh, the developing the re-engagement process.
Mm. I click that as done. I'll undo it.
Okay.
Um, let me actually I'll just do this. Um, this is why I hide the completed tasks. All right, let's find this. Hang on.
Because of the volume.
There are a lot of completed tasks.
It's not a bad thing to know that there's a lot of stuff that gets completed, though. It's very
Mhm. I'm just trying to figure out how uh, I can't find it in all of the. All right, I can't. Hang on. I think I got this. Um,
If you want the exact, it's develop quotation marks re-engagement quotation marks process. Or can I just
I got it. I got it
okay.
here.
So useless with this stuff.
Just takes me a while to get there. So, and actually, we can look at the whole list. Um, but yeah, this is the developing the re-engagement process, and there is a document called Engagement Playbook and CRM Requirements that was
Oh,
created in response to this task, which is why it's completed. But we can review that. And actually, do you want me to just bring that up?
right.
How do we want to review it? Do we want to just let me copy the link and put it in chat so everyone can look at it directly.
Great.
So just tell me where you want the focus to be, and I'll move along. And this was created using Aiden as part of ChatGPT
Right.
with revision. So it's not just um, there were some refinements that were made in the document.
So I'm reading the benefactors and I don't understand what underwriting is. Opportunities to underwrite?
Um, it's support, and there's I don't get hung up on the terminology. I think that's where the
Okay.
AI throws stuff in there.
I just didn't know what underwrite meant.
Invest in, I think, is an alternative.
Mm.
Invest in support. Um, and there's also the warm contact initiation. There's another layer in the I can't remember which task. There's a task which is actually like sending out email contacts, and there is an email template for each of the audiences
Right.
in the body of that task.
Okay.
And those are not refined. Those are just like AI generated. They're pretty good, and but they're intended to be templates, not not sort of like a lockstep script. So we can also look at those.
So what's our process? I'm usually come to this guild, so I don't wanna, are we doing circle or?
I kind of muddle through and hope that somebody else uh, has more clarity on how things happen. Is essentially what happens. So,
I mean, I have some stuff I want to say, but I don't know where it fits, so I'm.
well, should we do this together or should we read it on our own? And should we do it in circle or popcorn?
I'm not a huge fan of taking meeting time to have people read, but so and we the other thing too is we have a 2 o'clock at 2 o'clock the outreach guild is going to come online. So we have a limited time window for
Okay.
specifically Heartwork stuff.
All right. So I am going to read through it so that would that be a better way of doing it?
No,
Or-
no, that's I well, what do where are people now in their understandings? Do we need to go through that level of detail? What do people need to be up to speed?
And the order that I see on my screen is Ben, me, April, and Becca. So uh, I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed. So I'm going to pass and pass to April.
Okay, what I need is just to review this really quickly to start with, and then to understand who's doing what, I guess. Um, I kind of recognize what the process is, and we have talked about this before. Um, but it's not clear to me who is doing what, whether we're initiating these targeted conversations by email or by phone or Zoom or what, or is there a choice? And who is it that's doing this? Is it all of us, or is it that outreach starts and hands off at the point where they've done an initial contact to Heartwork, and then we follow up, we monitor and follow up what's happening, making sure that every, sequentially we get everybody at certain points into the future.
Um, if I can jump in because I feel like there's just a factual answer to that. How the plan is laid out is that the rough division of labor is that outreach is handling the more mass markety type stuff, the more social media. So the newsletter going out, social media posts, possibly helping with promotion around if we start setting up events. But that the warm ally outreach is the list is compiled. Hopefully everyone adds their own contacts. And then one of the tasks is divide warm contact list. And then when you are assigned, and of course, the hope is that we're dividing the contacts based on those who have relationships with people already. And then given that relationship, it's totally up to you about whether you want to send an email or a phone call or how you want to do it. But so the actual initiation of the re-engagement should be with people that we already have some
Right,
relationship with.
right, right.
It's not funneling in new interest.
Good. Okay. And are there timelines attached to this, or
Uh,
we just going to leap in and then see what happens after a certain period?
Yeah, I mean, this is I am at the end of a week where I blinked and it's Friday, and so I am not in a position to honestly entertain the idea that even if we set a timeline, that would have any bearing on reality. My timeline this week was different than my timeline. My planned timeline this week was different than my actual timeline this week,
Yeah.
but obviously there is a timeliness. I'll add the other thing too is that in addition now to the fall outreach plan in response to the offer that came in and then was did not go to fruition, and we also had another showing on Sunday,
Uh,
and haven't heard anything yet, but you never know the timeline that other people have for offers coming in. So there is some urgency under this, but it's also trying to move forward on the outreach plan with a sort of three scenarios um, frame. And those three scenarios are making some creating a net under us in case there is an offer comes in is accepted and we have to move quickly. So we do whatever planning and prep in advance of that so that we just have a backup plan if that happens, which includes trying to find crash pads for us where we might land. And we have some options to explore. So that's one scenario that we're planning as we're planning the outreach part.
right,
And the other is to think through how this outreach might change depending on if we can make an offer on this property, or does it take us so long, but we still have enough interest that we might be able to make an offer on another property? And another scenario that's kind of, if we think of buying this property as scenario one, buying a different property as scenario two, excuse me, and having to find a crash pad as scenario three, there's option 2B, which is we're starting to talk about as the Three Sisters option, which is Abundance Farm. There are two other farms in BC, Linnea and Abundance, that are we already have relationships with, who are trying to do some similar stuff, though they're in a different position. So it could be that option 2B is it doesn't happen here, but it happens in some combination of Abundance and Linnea. Um, so in terms of the answer to the timeline is as quickly as possible, but you can't push a rope,
right.
as a very wise person I know says.
She who always tries to push the rope. Yeah.
Yep.
And it's
Well,
left dangling by
You
a little
never know if it's
string.
true unless you actually give it a shot. Yep, still can't push it.
Well, th this is very handy context. Thank you. So this is a piece of a bigger system that's
Mhm.
going on that has lots of parts to it. But
Yeah.
there is some urgency because of offers and stability, I guess,
Hmm.
to get this underway.
Mm.
We also don't know what'll happen once we start getting it underway. A whole bunch of other things could pop up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but we're looking, it sounds to me then that we're looking like this is within the next months. We're doing some
Yeah, yeah.
concerted.
In fact, I was hoping to start initiating some of the outreach to the warm contacts list this week, and there are some that are high priority that I'm not
Yeah,
going to wait for other people to sort it out. I'm just going to go ahead.
yeah,
Um, I guess two other pieces of kind of relevant information is Roland and Steph Roland sent Steph some photos of some plants in the garden just to keep Steph, up to date on
yeah.
and let her connect with some of the plants that she'd planted. And she came back with an idea that we had also been talking about, which is um, one of our contacts in Vancouver who wants to do affordable housing land trusts. She was wondering whether he might be interested in some sort of paired country rural, combined project where it's housing in the city and attached to the retreat in the country. And her interest in that is very affirming, and
Yeah.
so yeah, just and this week, our guest this week, one of them is one of the core team members at Abundance. And so
Ah,
we started to talk to them about the Three Sisters idea, and there was a lot of interest, a real appetite, and a sense that this could be good for Abundance and it could be good for us at the same time.
wow. Okay. So can I just ask about the Three Sisters? Is that the corn, the yam, and the squash?
Corn, squash, beans.
Yeah.
Corn, squash, beans. Okay. Thank you. So
Over to Becca, I guess, or back to you, April.
over to Becca.
Thank you. Yeah, all very helpful. So I came partly because this is just a meeting that I could make. I've had so many conflicts lately. And also I was happy to see Heartwork having a important role in fundraising, because I've had a lot of experiences on both ends of the fundraising relationship, and it's not always done in a very relational, heartful way. And I feel strongly about it being done in a heartful relationship way whenever possible. And that's not easy. And it takes practice, and it takes, in my best experience of it, when I was doing the fundraising, I was being actively coached by a somatic leadership coach, and they were checking in with me basically about each relationship and what my emotional issues and that sort of thing were about fundraising and about that relationship. And it was amazing, because even if the person didn't give money or didn't give the amount of money I asked for, it moved the relationships forward and moved me forward in how I was able to be out about why I loved the project that I was fundraising for. And I would love to, I don't have relationships with any of these people. I'm not going to be the right person for the um doing the asks probably, but I would love to try to support you all in doing it in those ways. I had a sense from the recording that I listened to of the coordinating circle meeting that, and I know you, Ben, like that, there's this touches some painful places for you about, like, why aren't people just knocking down the door to give us money, and history with money and all of that. And I get that, and I have zero criticism intended about that. And my reaction was, well, they're not knocking down the door to give us money because we haven't asked for them for money yet, because we haven't been ready to ask, and we got to ask, and we got to ask, and we got to be ready to hear no in order to be able to ask in an open-hearted way. And that's a big chunk of emotional work potentially to do, and to not get it right all the time is fine. And so I yeah, wanted to come and say a bunch of that and offer either my time, or I don't know, that the fundraising, the finance and legal team feel have to meet and figure out what we're doing in terms of legal fees. And I think that needs to happen really soon in order to be able to actually be asking people to contribute to a thing, because otherwise it's still not clear what we're asking them to give money to or support in what way. And there may be money left in what I have to spend that I've allocated for legal fees that could be used to hire a fundraising coach, you know, who specializes in the kind of coaching I was just offering to do on my limited time. And I know that finding such a person, making all those decisions and finding such a person and getting up to speed with them is not a we need to, you know, a thing that can happen next week. But I think I just wanted to put it on the table as like something worth considering, because this is, this taps into to like some of the deepest challenges of this project and of your leadership of it. And in the context of trying to do something anti-capitalist within capitalism, it's at the core of the project, and probably will continue to be for quite some time, even if we got a big donor who gave us a bunch of money for the land.
Yeah.
Over to, I don't know, Roland? Ben? Roland.
I think to me.
Ben.
I like the idea a lot. It would be great for me to get more support. It would be even greater for me not to be the one who's always being supported. And I really want to find ways that I can lean into other people's strengths where I know I have weaknesses rather than trying to fix my own weaknesses. Um, and there are all sorts of ways in which I am willing and able to uh, take on what I can and to learn and to be supported in the way of doing that. One of the this is still well, I'll just come and say, frankly, it's also the idea of paying somebody else to support me when I don't have a way of supporting myself, like that somebody else makes money off of the fact that I'm still, struggling to make this come forward, is a little bit of a pinch. And uh, how am the bigger support would be to support me in actually being able to, you know, to get paid to do this work. And yeah, so I'm trying to give a both and answer of, and I'm still curious about why we think there isn't something to ask people to. In my mind, there is a very clear pathway now of what we're asking people to invest in. I can share the pyramid. It's an updated pyramid, but we have numbers of, size of donors in which categories, or not donors, size of benefactors and time sharecroppers and all that kind of stuff. And so, that's, yeah, I think my hope really is to try to figure out how to um, spread the load around a little bit. That was part of the reason why there is a, a, a task in here about dividing up the list. And even though it's sort of similar to Foodlands, Heather was the primary force behind Foodlands coming together, and she has most of the relationships, but Foodlands now is working actively to engage other people in those relationships so that Heather can introduce some more people, more voices. And in that same sense, I can be showing up, I can be doing what I do well. and be supported in the conversation with other people who can take on other parts of it. Um, like Becca, your ability to just, get in there and talk dollars and numbers and use the lingo, and, the ability that your experience of sitting on both sides of it,
Mm.
even though you don't have the relationship with them already, you could be my wingman. Or, we could figure out ways of supporting it. Supporting it rather than just getting me a coach and then pushing me up in front of, somebody to do the work. I love the idea of the coach. And actually that was one of I think bringing the idea of weaving Heartwork into this is that Heartwork as a guild has one responsibility, which is to look at everything with that relational lens. And I think that's having that hat, having that these are the glasses that we look through just to double check to make sure that that's happening. Um, yeah, so I think that's I totally agree. We want this to stay heart-centered. That is at the core of this challenge. Um, I do like some of the language that Aiden has created around, thinking of the money as compost, thinking of it as a rich resource and uh, coming into it that way. So anyhow, that's my response, and I will pass over to back to Roland.
Um, I think it could be useful to I think that our focus is for this meeting anyway, is to respond to the plan that was proposed by outreach. And there's new information that's coming in that I think that I think is good, and uh, is this information that would be more useful to discuss in the coordination circle. And I'm saying so there's that, and then there's also uh, um, the are is it the specifically the members who attend the Heartwork meetings that uh, I'm going to ask it as a question and then I'm going to reframe it as what I think. Okay. So is it the responsibility of the people who come to the Heartwork meetings to accomplish the goals that have been set out by the outreach? And this is what I would think that Heartwork is thinking through and organizing it for what I'm going to call a subcommittee of interested parties, or willing parties to actually do the work. So it's a kind of an and I'm thinking that most of the people who come to the Heartwork meetings will be part of the people who will actually be doing the work. But it's sort of an also and kind of distinction that I think could be useful because it also opens it up the possibility for people either from other guilds or new people from um, doing the requested work.
And
Um,
can I just clarify one point?
sure.
That this plan is not an outreach plan. This is a plan that came through the coordination circle. Right. So this is a plan that has been agreed on by all of the guilds through the coordination circle. And then outreach sort of, figured out how to divide up some of those tasks. So that I just wanted to
Okay.
clarify that.
Okay. Uh, I guess it'd be more accurate to say that a lot of this will be done in uh, with outreach. You know, outreach. So my understanding is that in terms of the compiling and communicating with the warm allies, is that outreach does the initial contact? No.
No, no, that's what I
Okay,
was
so
saying.
why don't we talk about what the plan, like the specifics of the plan is?
Okay. I thought I did this, but I'll walk through it again, which is the general division of labor is that outreach handles more of the mass marketing stuff. So newsletter, social media, and help with promoting events, working through networks. The Heartwork, my understanding was that Heartwork would take, well, and the coordination circle is the body that's responsible for divvying up the warm allies. So that is not an outreach thing or a Heartwork thing. It's actually at the coordination circle where we look at who's good to reach out to Chris, who's good to reach out to Joey, who's good to reach out to, you know, the people that we already have relationships with. So this is not, that work is not outreaches. It would be shared at the coordination circle. Does that help?
Okay, so when it says outreach creates opportunity for people to be curious and to capture interest, that's not a direct contact with the people, but it's the what you were talking about in terms of events.
Yeah.
And that when it says hard work is about tending relationships. Okay, when and where is the handoff between following up when people are curious, outreach, and tending the relationship hard work? I guess that's
Yeah.
where I got confused.
Yeah. But see, all the warm ally list are not new contacts. They are people that we've already had conversations with. So a new contact comes in, somebody sends out the newsletter, and we hear from somebody who we didn't realize may be a timeshare cropper. And they say, hey, I saw this. I'm interested in being a timeshare cropper. There's a handoff that goes, outreach sent out the email or sent out the newsletter. Probably it's their responsibility to respond to the initial request. And then we figure out when does that get handed over to Heartwork. So that's for a new interest. But for already existing interest, for the people that we've already had conversations with who have some sense of what we're doing, those are warm allies. We already know that they have some interest in what we're doing. So there's no handoff necessary.
Okay. All right. I was just reading what was under the Compile Warm Allies CRM list. I don't see anything about new people in there.
That's what I'm saying. It's not new people.
Right.
The warm allies are the already existing relationships, just drawing in from where we have these things. If we don't have, at this point, we have multiple things that kind of are like a CRM, and the compiling the list is pulling that all into one place and double checking with how those relate. Like Joey, we've had conversations with him. He's expressed some interest, but we haven't talked to him in a year and a half. So, he's on the warm ally list because he knows us, but we have to figure out how to re-engage him. But it's not new interest.
Okay. Thanks. Over to April.
So am I understanding this correctly that our warm allies for each of us individually, that we do the initial contact and we also continue up with those folks. So we're not handing off our relationships to somebody else. We continue on with, as we would in real life, with
Mhm.
people on a relational basis over time
Yeah.
going forward. Okay.
But there may be some, let me introduce you to so and so who can tell you more about such and such.
Great.
Right.
Sure.
It could be instead of just everything going through April, that there's an April and Ben meeting with the other person.
Yeah, which would be very good because if it only goes through April, there will be a lot of bottlenecks I am seeing in my future and trying to avoid. But just other things I want to comment on that I too am happy to coach for fundraising and can maintain some objectivity and help people to um, put the underpinnings to their message, I guess. I mean, one thing that occurs to me is that um, always in these situations, there is some urgency and some seriousness to the whole thing. And it's very easy to tip over into the intensity of that. And we need not to have that happen in our conversations with anybody else outside of us. We need to be warm and open, and we don't know what's going to happen. The outcome is not certain with any of these conversations, which Becca has pointed out, but other stuff will happen too. So we need to keep track of the other stuff, and we need to allow the opportunity for that to happen. But I'm happy to help coach on how to do that kind of stuff. It's no different than any other somewhat intimate and somewhat delicate conversation where there may be, there may also be difficult conversations, but we kind of know how to do that. So I'm happy to coach. I'm also obviously happy to keep up my relationships with the people that I've talked to last year or whatever about this, and very excited actually about having those conversations. But the third thing I just want to throw in, and this harks back to our coordination meeting, Ben, when you were saying, I wish I had an admin assistant, or I wish I could clone Ben, because you find yourself doing activities that somebody else could do, and that takes away from your time to do the content work, the thinking work, the linking work, and so on. And I myself am in that same position. And one thing that my company can do is put out some resources for finding somebody to do that for you in this situation, in the lifeboat situation, but also for me in my situation. So I think we need to talk further about how that could work. I have resources at the minute to do that. And if that lightens the load so that other stuff can flow in, then I'm happy to entertain how that could work. So over to Becca, I believe. Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm willing to try being a wingman, going with you on Zoom to a meeting and being the one who talks the money. And I hear that the wisdom in trying to stick with what you're already good at rather than trying to beat your head against places that are hard. And yeah, I think I encourage you to continue to hold open the possibility that things that feel hard can shift. I do think we still have a bunch of legal questions, not a bunch, but some legal questions to like, if somebody says yes, who do I make the check out to? We don't have an answer. And so, or do we? I don't know. I mean, like, and in terms of, the contribution that Don and I are talking about making, he has some suggestions, like there's I'm not saying wait until we get all that done to have these conversations, but I think for some of the larger donors that we need to have well, we had a plan that we were going to ask for feedback on it from them, but we, as far as I know, haven't moved forward with that because we haven't met. So I just want to figure out when we're going to dot those I's and cross those T's. I think something else about worm. Yeah, that's all I've heard to Ben.
So so this is the whole outreach strategy is to get the feedback on the bylaws. And at this point, this is what we're thinking about doing. Are you interested? If yes, these are the bylaws. Do they work for you? Give us your feedback on that, but not asking for feedback in the abstract, but well, actually, that's a little bit different because so for people like Joey and Chris, they also represent mavens who may be able to connect us with other people who might be investors. So for them, the question is, would you be willing to help spread the word on this? Are these bylaws things that you think your people would be willing, or, interested in? Would they have any questions, any problems? So that's getting the feedback from them, but with a yes, right? Not just in a sort of a generic, what do you think of these bylaws, but actually like, is this something you want to be involved in? And if so, then what's your feedback? And then once we gather that feedback, we'll also have a sense of, it's sort of assessing, are people like a strong yes and they have feedback, or are they a tentative, a very weak yes and they have some feedback, and, factoring all of that into the changes, whichever need to be made. My understanding of how this would happen is what people would actually be signing on would be, and I don't even know that it needs to be legal, but what we would want to do is establish a threshold number. If we raise this amount of money, we can go forward and form the entity. And once we form the entity, then people can write checks until we have a sort of a critical mass. What we're asking for is more or less a promissory note. People that are, we want people to say, yes, if this goes forward, I would put this much money into the project. And I don't even know how legal that needs to be, but really we just need an expression of commitment so that, and then, and we have a threshold that we're looking for. So right now it is, if you're interested, you're not writing a check yet, but you would be willing to write a check if and when we hit the threshold by a certain date, and then this would be a go. And largely this will depend on I was looking at the pyramids this morning, and one of the big questions is how much stuff might be able to float as a short-term, like a very short-term social mortgage holder, because that would significantly reduce the threshold that would allow us to make it legal. And whatever that, and really those are the kind of, one of the tasks that we have is nailing down those specific targets. How much would we need immediately as like a down payment? How much would we need by, say, the end of the first year, or whatever Steph's timeline is, and how much would we need over the long haul? So those are some of the particulars, but those aren't legal questions. Those are more, just financial questions, in my mind. So, and I think, what's coming forward for me is the more, I'm actually just really leaning into we should be thinking not about one-to-one contacts, but that every contact, that we think about pairs. And in part, that's also leaning into strengths, right? There's things to consider are the personal relationships, the subject area knowledge, and the nature of the conversation that we're expecting, So who needs to be there for a timeshare cropper conversation is probably different than who needs to be there for a benefactor conversation. And figuring out, and if I'm always in one of those pairs, that doesn't bother me at all. What leaves me feeling really flat is going alone,
Right.
and yeah. So I feel like the coaching I still think is good. Like the on the side coaching is I still think necessary and useful, and I would like to make that kind of official. And I think I would like to add a note to the divvy up the warm contacts list in, specifically at least a pair who maintain the relationship for each of those contacts. If nothing else, and one of the things that Heather's been, really clear about is it's actually not very peer-to-peer if everything goes into one person. That's a form of control and a bottleneck, and it skews what perspectives people hear. So, just in terms of healthy sociocratic practice, it's kind of double linking, which is kind of a core principle. So I feel like if nothing else, from this meeting, that seems like a really important thing to clarify and put forward. Over to you, Roland.
I am noticing the time, and there is an outreach meeting that will be starting in about 5 minutes. Um, Recognizing that there's this sort of sandwiching of meetings, we thought that it may be actually useful to have a little bit of overlap. So, if you were expecting the meeting to just be an hour, that's fine. If you're available for another half hour and have Ronnie and whoever else might be showing up for the outreach, I think it could be really productive, given that what we're talking about is something that where there is a handoff and an overlap with outreach. It could be super useful to have both guilds talk for at least even for just a little bit. So what think you? And I pass to April.
I think there's some really good sort of processes or procedures being emerging out of this, which is great. For instance, the two-person conversations, and getting at hard stuff. I mean, there's some parts of this that is hard, that are hard. Some parts that are hard, and you know, we're coming to grips, or at least we're holding them in our hand and thinking about what to do. We're facing them anyway, so that's a very good thing. I can't stay after 2. I'm sorry. It would be really fruitful to be able to do that, but I can't on this occasion. I'm also really tied up for the next 2 weeks. So I won't be able to do much in the way of conversations till after that. But I'm happy to engage when I'm able to. I think that's all I have to say. Was there a question that I haven't answered? I can't remember what the theme that we had got to.
I feel like that answers questions.
Okay.
To me, I have maybe 10 or 15 minutes. I've got a call coming in at some point. But I could stay on and until that call comes in if you want. Yeah, and I love the idea of teams of 2 and your other answers to some of my questions are reassuring. I like the model of yeah, a pledge or is what you would call it in fundraising. Although people if we're talking about investment, maybe promissory note is better. I don't know. Intention, there's a different language. We can ask Aiden what the good language is. And threshold. And I think that conversation with Steph would be great. And I would be more than happy to be there for that conversation with her. And I cannot make it to the next coordinating circle meeting because it's Yom Kippur, I think. So, but if we want to try to schedule other times, I can. Those.
Check with Ronnie too, though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first, right? Or that third is yeah, that Thursday. Yeah, whatever the day that is. Yeah, second. I don't know.
The second, I think it's the second.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second.
Over to Ben.
This is cool. I think April, I recognize and may have some sense of where your busyness in the next couple of weeks comes from. And I also am going to have to dedicate some time. I've got 4 presentations in 1 week in 3 different places. And so the first week of October is going to be a bit hectic, and I need to do some prep for that. And at the same time, I would like to move things forward as quickly as possible. And I think that there may be some email kinds of, if you're open to putting out some email queries And like I'm just thinking specifics about I want to populate the CRM and make sure that your contacts are in there and didn't get lost in the mix and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so I kind of feel like this is good, um and it's 2 o'clock, so it'll be interesting to see Ronnie popping up. I suspect it will just be Ronnie because I know Ruth can't make it, and there's Ronnie. Um, so at the very least, April, you can say hi before you say goodbye.
It's true. And I need to ask, is there another meeting of us within the next couple of weeks? I know there's a coordination circle meeting, but does Heartwork need to meet again?
I guess it depends on if we feel like we've had a fulsome conversation today. And if not, then another meeting, like deciding have we decided on what the process is, and do we feel comfortable? Do we know what's needed? That kind of thing. Uh,
I think at this point, as the keeper of the process, and this is one of those places where it's challenging for me because I'm working with this every day, and I realize none of you are. But we have had these conversations and we have had agreement, and so I don't want to keep having the conversations as though we're inventing something new. And I think where we need feedback from Heartwork at this point to move forward is around the story seeds and the email templates. Those little nuggets of conversation that Aiden is helping to shape for us in the spirit of template, not like it has to be a rote script, but from a Heartwork perspective, do those ring true? And is there
Okay.
anything that we need to, any changes or edits from that? And I don't think that needs a meeting unless if everyone can review it and say, thumbs up, this sounds good, here's a minor note here, a minor note there, then I don't think there's a need for a meeting until we start to get into dividing up the contact list.
Okay. Perfect. I need to race away now, but I just want to wave at Texas. Ronnie, nice to see you. Hello and goodbye.
Too. Hello and goodbye.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
So Ronnie, bringing you up to speed, we just got done with our Heartwork, and Becca's going to be able to stay on for a few minutes, like 10, 15 minutes, and has a call coming in. We're just seeing if there's any sort of overlap. And I think we were going through the Heartwork parts of the outreach plan and just kind of clarifying. And some of the questions that came up were really around the division of labor, where outreach is really focusing on the newsletter and the social media, and Heartwork is mostly focused on tone and making sure that the approach is still heartfelt, and then a reminder that divvying up the contact list is a coordination circle, so that's not one or the other guild, it's actually sort of high level, or at the coordination level. And I think the big innovation that came from our first hour is when we're talking about dividing up the contact list, we're now talking about teams of at least 2 who are assigned to each of the contacts. So that, and in large part, that's to give me a buddy for doing a lot of this work, but also for figuring out how you can bring your contacts in, and then how do we spread the communications, how do we sort of spread that more evenly? So that, I think that's the big thing. Do either Becca or Roland, you want to add anything to that?
I think that sounded good.